The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
Public defenders walk off the job in New York City. Meanwhile, over 100 women's college basketball players sign union authorization cards. And today on the show, it's our first Friday with Fred Redmond, Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. Welcome to the Friday, August 7th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Well, we are in that countdown to Labor Day. Boy, this year is flying by. This Labor Day, 132 years in the making. We call this Labor 132. And what we do, we just talk to the various guests, our union sponsors here on the show, and try to get their take on Labor Day and their history. And I'll tell you, Fred Redmond, 50 plus years in the Steelworkers, he's got a lot to talk about, and he's going to share with us his personal story. Here's a guy that grew up in the South, okay? It was tough growing up in the South, especially for an African-American family. He is going to talk about his journey and his family journey into the union movement and how that made a profound difference in his life. It's a great story, and Fred's going to share it with us. Now, I also want to drive people to the national website, AFL-CIO.org, and read our labor history timeline. It reads as follows. Throughout our history, the labor movement has accomplished a lot. If you get weekends off or overtime pay, thank the union members who fought for those rights. None of our movement's achievements would have happened without the effort. Amen to that. And when you scroll down, you will see a lot of dates in history, like 1871. After her dress shop is destroyed in the Great Chicago Fire, Mary Harris, better known as Mother Jones, begins working as a labor organizer. And boy, she did a lot. 1912, Bread and Roses strike, begun by immigrant women in Lawrence, Massachusetts, ended with 23,000 men, women, and children on strike, and with as many as 20,000 on the picket line. 1933, Frances Perkins becomes the U.S. Secretary of Labor, the first woman to be appointed to the U.S. cabinet. Her social activism started when she, in 1911, watched 140 plus, mainly women, mainly immigrants, jump to their deaths in the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. Check that out. AFL-CIO.org. Fred Redmond, our featured guest today on the show. Now, brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. About 300 attorneys and staff at the Bronx Defenders have walked off the job, becoming the third New York City public defense organization to strike this month. The Bronx Defenders Union is demanding higher wages for its lowest paid workers. That includes investigators, advocates, and social workers who were offered annual raises of just 3%. Come on now. The walkout follows strikes by Brooklyn Defender Services, which walked out January 16th and reached a tentative deal about a week later, and the Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem. They started striking on July 24th. All 3 organizations are separate firms with separate contracts, but they share the same UAW-affiliated union. By the way, the Bronx Defenders, they represent roughly 20,000 clients annually nearly all of whom cannot afford private attorneys. Over 100 women's college basketball players have signed union authorization cards with the United College Athletes Association, the UCAA, marking the first unionization effort in U.S. women's college sports. Additionally, members of the Oregon State women's basketball team filed a petition for union representation with the Oregon Employment Relations Board, officially seeking collective bargaining rights under state law. And now it's time to talk about the Union Busters of America. Once I got to do a shout out to Bob Funk and his team over there. Let me do that again. 3, 2, 1. And now it's time to shame the Union Busters of America. Got to thank Bob Funk and his team over at Labor Lab in Montana for providing this. Just go to laborlab.us. We have two here out of Michigan. East Coast Labor Relations. That's the union busting firm that was hired by Train Technologies. $4,000 a day. Also, Westport Axle in Michigan hired East Coast Labor Relations for $3,400 a day. There's Cannon Labor Relations in Tennessee. Cherry Coating hired them, $2,500 a day. They also hired them in Georgia. Same fee, $2,500 a day. Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center has hired the Crossroads Group Labor Relations Consultants, $475 an hour. And that election was lost. There were some union objections to that. One more here in the state of Ohio. Haven Services hired EVGV for $275 an hour. That election also lost. So the Union Busters, I guess, are doing their job. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's our first Friday with Fred Redmond, Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LiUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LiUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LiUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LiUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Iron Workers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And don't forget, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Boy, this year is flying by. It's already Friday in August, and it's our first Friday with Fred. We started this a couple of years ago. Fred, longtime steelworker, over 50 years with the United Steelworkers, one of the many proud sponsors of America's Workforce, and now he is the Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. We're talking about a union that represents millions of Americans and growing and organizing. It's going to get bigger here the next 5 years. Fred, welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your contributions to all workers in America, because, you know, when union workers benefit, all workers benefit. That's the way it goes. And it's kind of funny, too. I've many times have said this on the show. I remember when the big three automakers, well, they did the stand-up strike a couple of years ago. Sean Fain got his way. And what happened? The non-union plants raise their wages. Why? Because they knew that Sean Fain was going to bring a team of people in there to organize them. So that's what happens in America. But Fred, what I want to do, and this is part of our segment we call Labor 132. This Labor Day will be the 132nd anniversary of the creation of Labor Day as a national holiday. And you know what? We have to celebrate that. As far as I'm concerned, Fred, every day is Labor Day here on America's Workforce. Every day is. And I just want to reflect on your rich union history. I mean, a half century with the Steelworkers. I'm sure you have plenty of stories that you can share. Just touch on a few today, and we could do more down the road of struggles that, that help workers out.
Absolutely. Well, I could start with my own internal struggle. I'm the son of a man and a woman who family were sharecroppers in the deep south of Mississippi. And during that great migration from the south to the north, they came here for one specific purpose, to seek a better life for the four sons that they was raising. And they wound up on the south side of Chicago. My father did every kind of job he could find. He pumped gas. He stocked shelves in the supermarket. He did everything he could do in order to support his family. My mother was a domestic. She woke up every morning, took 3 buses to get out to the far suburbs of Illinois to clean folks' houses and cook their food. And then one day my life took a turn. I went through a human transformation. My father and mother was able to save by their first home, and my father was able to get a brand new used car. And for once in my life, Flash, we started going to a doctor's office instead of going to the free clinic. And what I found out later on was my father got that first union contract. He became a unionized worker at an aluminum mill on the southwest side of Chicago. I went through like I said, I went through a human transformation. Life became better for me and my family. So this is personal to me, to be able to support your family, to earn a decent wage and live with respect, and one day retire with dignity. Workers wake this country up every morning, and they tuck this country in at night. The American worker is the most productive of God's creation. We need to celebrate workers 365 days a year because, workers have kept this country going and kept the lights on. They ought to be celebrated.
We're speaking with Fred Redmond, Secretary Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. If you go to the national website, AFL-CIO.org, you got to check out the labor history timeline, and it goes back centuries. A lot of interesting events that kind of formed where we are today when you think about what labor accomplished. For this segment, though, Fred, I mean, with your time in the Steelworkers, there's got to be a couple of things that you can call attention to that obviously you helped out workers, and I'm sure that made you and everybody else at the Steelworkers felt pretty darn proud. Anything you could reflect on?
One thing that really made me proud, Flash, to be part of the global labor movement also, where I led a movement in Liberia, West Africa, to organize poor workers on what they called a rubber plantation. Was owned by Harvey Firestone, and we led them and organized them and helped them form the union. That was one of my proudest moments. But also, Flash, to just follow in my father's footsteps. My father was a union official. He was a negotiator, a zone committeeman, and he was so proud of the work that he did. For once in his life, growing up in the rural Jim Crow South, he told me one time when he sat at that bargaining table, or when he sat at that grievance table, there's a certain power that came over him for once he felt that he was on the same ground, okay, with the you know, people who abused him in his early days, and the people who took advantage of him in his later days, denied him the right to vote and many other things. But when he sat down representing the union, he felt a certain power amongst himself. And it was proud for me to follow in his footsteps. But throughout the union, we've had strikes at Reynolds and Alcoa. I've seen some of the most impossible strikes that people thought was going to break the union, but we found a way to hang in there one day longer than the company. That's all you got to do is just stay one day longer than the company. And we found a way to do that, during some terrific struggles and tremendous struggles throughout the labor movement. I'm proud of the fact that, I was able to be part and still able to be part of this great movement that Lynn Williams, one of our former presidents, used to always say. He said, we represent workers that good people. People wake up every morning, want to be good citizens, go to work, pay their taxes, and they only shortfall in life, okay, if they're not able to represent themselves at work, in the workplace. And that's what we do every day.
Mhm.
We represent workers. We speak for workers who just want to earn a living, just want to raise their families, have no intentions of becoming millionaires or billionaires. They just want a part of this American dream. And the labor movement has been very instrumental in making sure that that dream become a reality.
Fred, as you know, anytime workers get together, it's a struggle. I mean, it goes back centuries. I mean, there's a story going back to the 1790s, I believe it was, when the cord waiters were trying to organize, and they were found guilty for one reason: they asked for more money.
No.
I mean,
Right, right.
it never ever stops. With that being said, I get the impression that, when you're told you can't have those wages, you can't have those benefits, or you're going to lose your job, or we have to cut your pension or your health care, it has the opposite effect. Workers say, wait a minute. No, 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 no. That's not going to happen. I'm just wondering right now, especially in the time that we're living in. I mean, we're seeing a lot of organizing. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Well, we're seeing a lot of organizing because, workers with income inequality, with the gap between the boss's pay and the workers' pay, workers simply have one simple demand, and it's very simple. They want to share in the profits that they help to create. That's all. That's all that they're asking for is to be valued, to share in that wealth that they help to create, and to be treated fairly and for their safety on the job to be respected. And that's all they want. It's actually a premise is that they want to be treated as citizens, as human beings. They want to be recognized for their worth. And all workers have worth, and all work have dignity. The acts from workers, the demand from workers is something that's not too complicated. It's about treating people with dignity and respect. It's done almost became not almost, but it have became a mentality of us versus them. The difference between pay between CEO and workers' pay is just off the charts. It's one of those sort of things where we go to work every day expecting to be treated with the respect that we deserve. That's not always the case. And, right now, workers are finding unions to be the best vehicle, okay, to solve some of the tremendous problems that we're facing today. Union popularity is higher than it has been in 70 years, actually. And, we're really, really doing everything that we can to beat back the labor laws to make it more easier for all workers to organize. And at the end of the day, we're going to win this struggle because we're on the right side of history.
Yeah, good point on that. If we had an easier way to organize, and if the labor laws, were in favor of workers, we'd see a huge boost in union membership.
Absolutely.
Huge one.
Absolutely.
Huge one. Well, Fred, I'm going to let you go. I thank you so much. And those of you listening, I encourage you, first of all, just get educated. There's a lot of great sites out there. And the one we're talking about today is the AFL-CIO website, aflcio.org. And check out our labor history timeline and find out how we got to where we are today. It's so important because it wasn't easy. It's still not easy. Fred, you take care. Stay safe. We'll talk to you next month. Okay, brother?
You too. Thanks a lot, Flash. Thanks for all you do.
And that'll be it for another edition of the America's Workforce. Coming up on Monday, the Ohio Labor Federation and the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. Until then, all of you, have a safe and wonderful weekend.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.